I've had a number of people ask me now that the Booster Course Pass expansions have ended, what my updated predictions for Mario Kart 9 are. Previously, I've already made a video series going over my predictions for what a traditional sequel to Mario Kart 8 could have looked like, going through the characters, tracks, items, battle mode, and etc. under the impression that, well, the Booster Course Pass and Tour never existed. These predictions are obviously now outdated, but I don't think it's as simple as now just updating my previous predictions in the same format, under the expectation that the following game will have the same structure and formula as the previous games in the franchise. I could for instance go over what a set of 4 new retro cups could look like. Ultimately, it would just be cherry picking what few tracks didn't make its way into the DLC for Mario Kart 8, which would mostly be tracks from Mario Kart 8, the 2D games, or the few select tracks like Wario Stadium from 64. At the end of the day, however, I would be very surprised to see Nintendo release the next game as a straight and direct sequel to 8. No matter how high quality the courses or the visuals may be, a traditional sequel just wouldn't fly in this day and age when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has nearly 100 tracks to choose from. Going from that to the standard 32 from previous games would be a massive turn-off for a lot of the general audience. In my eyes, I really do feel like, given especially if the following Nintendo console will be backwards compatible, the next Mario Kart game will probably be radically different from the previous games. And that's what I'll be discussing in this video, my ideas and predictions for what Mario Kart 9, or whatever you want to call it, could be in a post-Booster Course Pass world. To start, I feel like it's pretty necessary to go over what the possible title will be, because I'm certain that a number of you probably opened up this video if only to comment that Mario Kart Tour is actually Mario Kart 9. Now to me, this is a bit of a fruitless argument because at the end of the day I don't expect the following game to retain a number in its title. Especially if I said before, if the following game acts as a bit of a reboot or a shake up to the formula, I doubt Nintendo would want to brand it as another Mario Kart game, a direct sequel to 8. In general, I'd expect Nintendo to treat Mario Kart in the same manner that they have treated Mario Party and just ditch the numbers outright. That said, I am under the impression that if the following game were to be numbered, it would more than likely not be called Mario Kart 10, simply just because it'd be pretty confusing to consumers to jump from 8 to 10. Now, I understand the argument that Tour is a mainline game, but it has already ended support, and for all we know, it will probably be taken off stores by the time the next Mario Kart game comes out anyway. If it were fully supported still, I could imagine them calling the next game 10 to advertise specifically for Tour, but that doesn't seem likely anymore. The absolute most I could expect is something like Mario Kart X, like in Roman numerals, but even then I'd still bet on the idea that the following game would just not be numbered. Now in terms of the title itself, I have to imagine that they would stick to the Mario Kart branding, simply because it sells like hotcakes. Add Mario Kart to anything and it's bound to sell tens of millions of copies. Nintendo knows this, I know this, everyone knows this. Even if the next game turns out to be something like Nintendo Kart or Super Smash Kart, a crossover game rather than being strictly Mario, I would genuinely be shocked if they didn't stick with the Mario Kart branding regardless, because they'd be shooting themselves in the feet that way, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. For the direction of the following game, this is the biggest point of contention for me. As I said, I would be shocked if the following game just went back to series roots after Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and all of its DLC. I know that the anti-gravity somewhat added to the tracks and the gameplay, and while it was definitely a step in the right direction, I do feel like ultimately it is pretty cosmetic and barely changes much outside of cool set pieces. Plus, it completely plagiarizes Crash Nitro Kart, even with the wheels turning on the side in anti-gravity. I feel like taking Mario Kart 9 to the next level beyond anti-gravity would be great. I have to imagine that this game would need to be treated as the Mario Wonder equivalent of the Mario Kart franchise. That it would take the previous games that have all felt arguably stale and samey and completely innovate the formula and make things fresh. In that all the new tracks and content would have a lot more to them than previous games to make this game stand out from its predecessors and to warrant this game's existence in a world where the previous game has a truckload of content. Could the following game literally be Mario Kart Wonder, in that every track has a super unique gimmick or mechanic? Honestly, I started with this idea as a bit of a joke, but the more I thought on it, the more suitable it is, really. A vast majority even, of the tracks from the previous games in the series are pretty static, or even stagnant. They can look good and have great designs, but they don't do anything, if that makes any sense. Imagine if a Wonder Flower appeared halfway through a track and it resulted in the last lap or so to completely change. Maybe a visual effect, or a gameplay mechanic change, or even the course or the environment itself to completely change. let's remove ourselves from the Wonderflower idea in particular, just because it's not necessary. Because I've been saying for a long time that dynamic tracks in general could be a great evolution for the Mario Kart franchise. Look nowhere else than Sonic Transformed, which pretty much all of the courses in that game have changing environments and layouts as you race through them. Not just the different gameplay styles of the boats and flying, of course, but the tracks themselves completely changing through maybe subtle story events, or escalations throughout the race, or just a simple different direction the course goes in. I feel like doing something like Sonic Transformed on steroids could be a great idea for the following game. The reason I say all this is that having extremely high quality courses to race through would warrant having a much smaller number of them to choose from. In fact, having the tracks be radically changed and improved not just through additions like underwater or anti-gravity, but also through dynamic and changing tracks and completely redone and reimagined track layouts could help to solve the issue of running out of retro courses to include. If all the courses radically change, then I don't see any issue at all with reusing even tracks that were included in the booster course pass. Now, another possible direction the following game could take to make it stand out on its own would be to have an in-depth single-player story mode. An obvious comparison would be both the Diddy Kong Racing and Crash Team Racing games, but I feel like going a step further and having a much more involved story, really detailed overworld and hub worlds to explore, items and collectibles to find and unlock, great visuals, etc. Of course, this would also incorporate minigames like in Mission Mode, which have been completely absent from the series since Wii's Online Mode unless you really want to count Tour. I feel like having a more traditional selection of characters and courses would be overlooked if there was a really meaty story mode. Another direction would be a more simple direction, and one that Nintendo did with both 7 and 8 with the underwater gliders and anti-gravity, and it's to add in a new gameplay mechanic or feature to change up the formula. This kind of overlaps a little bit with what I was saying about the Wonderflower idea. What I mean is that something like Double Dash did to the previous games. This game added the Double Dash mechanic, obviously, but it is, to this day, not including spin-offs and side games, the most unique Mario Kart game gameplay-wise, a game that many people revisit to this day. I'm not saying necessarily to bring back the Double Dash formula, although I wouldn't be complaining and it would be a great idea actually, but just generally completely and radically changing the gameplay up for the following game I think would be enough. Or to bring up Sonic Transformed again, or even Diddy Kong Racing for that matter, having different driving styles like boats and planes would go a long way. Possibly underground drill racing could be expanded upon, as I know that was a previously explored concept for the series. Making the gameplay for the next game so different that it's not even comparable to the previous games would help to make it stand out from Mario Kart 8 and warrant a smaller list of courses. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the gameplay that changes too much if there's a substantial selection of new and creative modes, outside of a story mode or a mission or battle mode of course. I'm not too sure exactly what it could be besides my brain rot going instantly to the idea of a battle royale mode or something, but I feel like if there's a brand new type of gameplay mode that Nintendo could bring to the series that would make it compelling to revisit the game would be a great addition, if my reasoning being a little vague. Possibly something along the lines of Mod Nation Races, and having the following game be something like Mario Kart Maker. Now, the final direction I think is the most obvious one that a lot of people bring up. I feel like over time people have become a lot more abrasive towards this concept, but the following game completely leaning into being a crossover racing game. Like I mentioned before, Nintendo Kart, Smash Kart, whatever you want to call it. I understand why people are against the idea, in fact I flip-flop with my opinion on this all the time, but I feel like ultimately I would be down for it. I see a massive argument against it that there wouldn't be any more creative tracks, but I don't really get that argument at all. I don't see why including courses, characters, and items from other Nintendo franchises would limit the creativity. I don't see why there couldn't be any original tracks not based on anything in particular, or tracks with interesting ideas that aren't based on any particular location, but maybe just a vibe of a franchise. But even then, seeing more things like the Woohoo Island, Excite Bike, F-Zero, Animal Crossing, and Zelda tracks would be very cool regardless. I think having a more diverse cast would be very refreshing and pretty exciting to see a lot of my favourite franchises and characters represented. As I said before, I do expect the game, if this were to happen, to still lean mostly on the Mario side, to still be called Mario Kart. It is somewhat of a spectrum, to be fair, how far they go into this, to have no non-Mario content, on the other side to fully embrace a crossover game, or maybe even somewhere in the middle like with Mario Kart 8 to just have some guest characters and courses. I think something to note is that unless it is fully something like Smash Kart, I don't really expect any even second party characters going by trends. Looking at pretty much every Nintendo EPD or EAD crossover type game like Nintendo Land and like Mario Kart 8's DLC, besides amiibo support, these games only dive into first party in-house properties. Franchises that are only partly owned by them like Pokemon, and don't quote me on this, Earthbound and Kirby would probably not be included if the guest characters were treated similarly to how they were in Mario Kart 8 and 8 Deluxe. That said, there's still a bunch of franchises still on the table. For instance, we could see all the previous characters, including Rob return, and new ones like Samus, Captain Falcon, etc. be playable. I think we get the point though. I'm thinking I may eventually expand on all these ideas in a future standalone Nintendo Kart ideas video though. Now, there's no reason why any of these individual directions have to be isolated. Imagine if the following game went into all possibilities I gave. Crossover of guest characters with new gameplay mechanics, dynamic tracks, maybe a track builder, and a meaty story mode. That would be the perfect Mario Kart game, and I would not mind having a limited number of courses to choose from. I am a broken record at this point. I guess for the final portion of this video, I think it would be a good idea to go over the possible tracks and Mario characters that could be included for the following game. Mario Kart Tour still has a number of characters that unfortunately didn't make its way into Mario Kart 8. Besides clones, these characters include Dixie Kong, Nabbit, King Bob-omb, Charging Chuck, Monty Mole, of course Donkey Kong Jr. could also return, and there's probably a few others I'm missing as well given the Goliath of that roster. In terms of other Mario characters that have never made their way to the Mario Kart franchise, I think Luma, Cappy, Boom Boom, the Broodals, Pianta, maybe Noki, Professor Egad, maybe even Waffle, and other Paper Mario and Mario Luigi characters in general would be great inclusions. Hey, maybe even Goomba, honestly. There's a lot to go around. In terms of the courses that have never been remade before, I'm gonna ignore the 2D courses and of course the Mario Kart 8 tracks that have never been remade. There's still a respectable number of tracks that could return, of course, these being Wario Stadium 64, Mushroom City, Wario's Coliseum, Bowser's Castle GCN, Rainbow Road GCN, Figure 8 Circle, Bowser's Castle DS, Rainbow Road DS, which would be perfect for anti-gravity, Luigi's Circuit Wii, Toad's Factory, Mario Circuit Wii, Bowser's Castle Wii, and the Woohoo Island and Mountain Loops. There's also tracks that have only ever been remade for Mario Kart Tour, including Dry Dry Ruins, Daisy Hills, Cheap Cheap Cape, Shy Guy Bazaar, Mario Circuit 3DS, Wario's Galleon, Bowser's Castle 3DS, and probably a few others. And of course additional tracks from Tour itself like Piranha Plant Pipeline and the remixed and reversed tracks could be included. And of course I will always expect Rainbow Road GBA to be remade for Mario Kart 9, even if that pattern that was established in 7 and 8 has become pretty muddied by this point given the additional 2 Rainbow Roads added in its DLC. Now with all of this said and done, I will go back and eventually make another prediction video series on the following game, go into specifics and more in-depth ideas at a later point. However, for now I think it'd be best to just wait on it until more information is released about it, such as rumours, leaks, or teasers, or even an announcement. Until then, I'm still pretty happy with my previous prediction videos on Mario Kart 9. In fact, I think the battle mode, item, and miscellaneous videos aren't outdated at all, they all still hold up. In terms of the courses, however, well, after the booster course pass, yes, it's very outdated unfortunately, but I don't think it's easy to give a prediction for the next set of courses at this point in time, but hey, maybe I could try at some point. Anyway, I'm very interested in hearing what any of you think about the following game, so feel free to leave any comments about that, and otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.